Sadly, Paul Heyman is in the hospital after an attack on SmackDown by Solo's Bloodline, as Roman Reigns can't believe what happened to his manager and close friend, Paul Heyman. And now there is a new update about Paul Heyman's current medical status. We'll get to all of this in today's video. It's been a very, very hard week for Roman Reigns. He's already had to deal with the tragic death of his father, Sikoa, and now he has to deal with another unspeakable tragedy, with Paul Heyman being sent to the hospital by a faction that Roman Reigns himself originally created. All of this went down on SmackDown, but there were things that many may have missed, as the original broadcast did not show everything, but we will show everything and give you all of the latest updates. SmackDown took place in New York City at Madison Square Garden. As we know, that is where WWE calls home. As scheduled, Solo's Bloodline had an acknowledgement ceremony where each member of the Bloodline told Solo they acknowledge him. And Solo, before they started, stole one of Roman's catchphrases, as he said, "Madison Square Garden, acknowledge me." And then each member of the Bloodline, Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, and Jacob Fatu, all said, "I acknowledge you, Solo." Not, "I acknowledge you, Roman. I acknowledge you, Solo." And then Solo turned to Paul Heyman to get his acknowledgement. Paul Heyman looked like he hadn't slept for days. Gray stubble covered his face. His eyes bloodshot. It was obvious he was experiencing high anxiety. As Solo waited for Paul Heyman to acknowledge him, Heyman began to cry, and that is when Paul Heyman said, "I acknowledge that you are not my tribal chief," showing Paul Heyman's allegiance to Roman Reigns. But then the unthinkable happened. Solo hit Paul Heyman with the Samoan spike. Jacob Fatu dove off the top turnbuckle and hit Paul Heyman with a headbutt. And then the moment that sent Paul Heyman to the hospital, a powerbomb through the announcer's desk. Paul Heyman laid there, lifeless. An unmitigated disaster was occurring before our eyes. But what happened next was even worse. While the Bloodline nor Paul Heyman spoke about the passing of Roman's father, Sikoa, WWE did have a special segment where SmackDown commentators paid their respects to Sikoa in the very building, Madison Square Garden, where Sikoa wrestled many times for WWE. They then introduced a special tribute video package as WWE and fans said one last goodbye to Roman's father, Sikoa. He will be gone, but not forgotten. So now back to this Paul Heyman situation, as three members of the Bloodline hoisted up Paul Heyman to powerbomb him through the announcer's desk. They almost dropped Paul Heyman, and Solo got into position to try and catch Paul Heyman. Some say that Solo broke character in this moment, showing possibly some caring for Heyman. "Oh, I don't want him to fall. I have to catch him." You can see him kind of put his arms out just in case they dropped him. But they didn't drop him, and they were able to powerbomb him through the announcer's desk. And then the tribal chief necklace that Roman wore and was given to him by his late father was placed on Solo, as it became official. Solo is now the official tribal chief. And from the words of Corey Graves at the end of the show, maybe it's time to believe Solo that Roman is not coming back to WWE. But then things took an even more tragic turn after SmackDown went off the air. Paul Heyman, who laid there lifeless with shards of the announcer's desk around him, was attended to by WWE doctors and paramedics. He was lifeless, not moving. Something was terribly wrong. They immediately put him onto a stretcher and began to wheel him out of Madison Square Garden. But as they were wheeling him out on the stretcher, they had to pass by the Bloodline, the very same Bloodline that had just powerbombed him and were responsible for him now being on a stretcher. Time was of the essence, as they had to get Paul Heyman to the hospital as soon as possible, or else the unthinkable might happen. They placed Paul Heyman in the ambulance as he was taken to the emergency room at the hospital. And right now, according to WWE, that is where Paul Heyman currently is, still in the hospital, as this is turning out to be a very serious situation. And now we are learning what the current medical condition is of Paul Heyman. And unfortunately, it's not good, as doctors are fearing the worst. Paul Heyman is 59 years old. He has been a mainstay in professional wrestling. And this week has been hard enough for Roman Reigns. And right now it seems like they're about to get a lot harder, as all of this could be too much to handle for Roman Reigns, losing his father and now basically losing a friend. Paul Heyman most likely will never be the same. He's not a professional wrestler. He doesn't have the training to take falls to protect himself. Paul Heyman rarely takes bumps, and this is one of the biggest bumps he has ever taken. And the fact that it happened as he's nearing in on 60 is as dangerous as you can get, as this attack is going to have huge ramifications on Paul Heyman's health. And right now, Paul Heyman is currently still in the hospital, and it very well could be that Roman Reigns is on his way to visit Paul Heyman and be by his side to let Paul Heyman know how much he cares for him and that he can't believe what Solo's Bloodline did to him. And Roman Reigns may want to thank Paul Heyman for sticking up for him, for letting Solo know, you are not my tribal chief. My allegiance stands with Roman Reigns, not you. And Roman, when he saw this segment, had to shed a tear, knowing that Paul Heyman would never betray him. And word is that Paul Heyman will not be returning to WWE anytime soon, if at all. He is basically gone, just like Roman. What are your thoughts about Solo's Bloodline attacking Paul Heyman and sending him to the hospital? Leave a comment and give me your opinion.